Hello and welcome to the programme. Now on April the 21st, the final round of the presidential election took place here in Ukraine. The preliminary results of the Central Election Commission don't really differ that much from those presented by the National Exit Poll, which shows showman Volodymyr Zelenskiy winning around 73% of the vote. Now I'm pleased to say, to talk more about this, we are joined in the studio today by Dr. Svitlana Khutka. She is the spokesperson of the Kiev International Institute of Sociology. Hello, thank you so much for coming in.
My pleasure to be here. Thank you for inviting me.
So the second round, obviously the ballot paper was a lot smaller this time round.
Well, yeah.
But what was interesting from the actual results was that apart from Lviv region, Volodymyr Zelenskiy really appeared to dominate the voting across all parts of Ukraine. But when you're doing your analysis, what are you looking at in particular? How do you break down all this information? Is it just by votes, or do you look at age, gender, that sort of thing?
Yes, we divide information by categories. So for now, we have very detailed data for the regional divisions. And later we also will do divisions by age, gender, etc. But what is more important so far is actually gender differentiations. So when we're talking about the general results, as you have mentioned already, Volodymyr Zelenskiy, by the exit poll results, he is getting 73%, and 25.5 are given to Petro Poroshenko. And if you're talking about the percentage of votes at West region, for Volodymyr Zelenskiy voted 56.9, almost 57%. And for Petro Poroshenko, 41.3. And 1.7, they actually destroyed bulletins or somehow, damaged them and so on. In central Ukraine, 70.2 for Volodymyr Zelenskiy and 28 for Petro Poroshenko. South Ukraine, 85.4 for Volodymyr Zelenskiy and 13.5 for Petro Poroshenko.
Is that quite surprising, actually, for the, I mean, what was a result that perhaps surprised you a bit? Maybe something that was unusual?
So far, not that much, because we had a set of preliminary studies, surveys, which at least they, demonstrated the trend.
Yeah.
And in East, we had 87.3 for Volodymyr Zelenskiy and 11.5 for Petro Poroshenko.
Does this include the military, by the way, or is that separate to your study?
So what is important actually to say that exit poll doesn't include people who were voting on special voting stations. Those people who are in hospitals, those people who are in army, those who were voting abroad, and also those who have been in prisons and were voting at home.
Yeah.
So when we're talking about these results, they are representative for the adult population of Ukraine, which were actually, voting, I would say, not in the special conditions.
Yeah, and you said that you haven't quite looked at gender, but you said gender differentiation. What does that mean?
Gender differentiation is not that big, because we have maybe around 10% higher percentage of women who were participating in voting in general for both candidates, but it's not due to some, political preferences. It's just due to the demographical structure of the country.
But I think it'd be interesting as well to see with Volodymyr Zelenskiy, a lot of his campaign, I know you can't talk about his campaign itself, but a lot of it was run on social media, which is often where younger voters would go. So this will be interesting in your study to see whether there'll be any impact, maybe.
Yeah, actually, if you're talking about the previous results, we could see that he has predominantly voters among people who are younger than 30 and 45 years. So the younger generations, they were more voting for him. But in general, anyway, the distribution of votes was pretty high in other age categories either.
Yeah.
So even, for example, if you're talking about the educational differences, almost same story. We have slightly higher amount of people who were voting for Poroshenko having the complete higher education, graduate education and postgraduate education, and those who are others, they were more predominantly voting for Zelensky. The maybe most striking difference was at level of language. So those people who were more Ukrainian-speaking Ukrainians, they were voting more for Poroshenko. And those who again have tendency to use Russian, they voted for Zelensky more. But again, if you're talking about the regional difference here, you also can see that in West, the difference is not that strikingly high as in other regions, as for example in Center, South and East. Because again, Southern Ukraine and Eastern Ukraine, predominantly they gave their voices to Volodymyr Zelenskiy. And if you're talking about the Western Ukraine, here you have these 57 and 41.
So is there a difference between the different regions in terms of turnout? I mean, for example, do we see more people voting in Western Ukraine or Eastern Ukraine, or is there not really a trend like that?
Well, I would say that a bit surprisingly, but for the second round, actually, the turnout was a bit lower, and especially in Western Ukraine. If you would compare with any other actually elections which had happened earlier, the Western Ukraine was always more active during elections, and this time the turnout was a bit lower.
Yeah. Well, that's interesting.
Not again, like, this dramatic difference,
but just a small change.
Yeah, exactly.
And what I think was particularly interesting, both with the second round that we had on Sunday, but also the previous round, was that the first official exit poll results were surprisingly accurate, because when we look around the world, if you look at, for example, for me it's Brexit, and a lot of the polls were saying, oh no, it's never going to happen. And then it happened, and then obviously we had Donald Trump as well, and he beat forecasts. But with these results, actually they were like pretty accurate.
Yeah, they were very accurate.
So why were they so accurate? What sort of systems are there to make sure that they are as accurate as possible? I mean, for example, are there anonymous questionnaires, or are there people asking these questions about how they voted?
It's actually two reasons behind. Kyiv International Institute of Sociology, who have been responsible for the academic part and for the sampling methodology, uses the most precise, actually randomized sampling as it is possible. And also the methodology of the secret ballot was used. So it means that people were more open actually to give answers which were close to what they voted for, to whom they voted for during the election process.
Oh, so that's when they take their paper, sort of like another vote almost, but actually it's just a questionnaire
this is actually
in a sealed
the
box.
Anonymous, answering to the kind of this bulletin they are getting from the interviewer. And actually it means that they can be, safe about their answers. And also, it's also about sampling, because the national exit poll is representative for all regions. It was actually conducted in all oblasts. And also, it means that results are very precise.
And what about voters abroad as well? I mean, is it more difficult to sample or easier? Because often in these polling stations abroad, they only have a couple of hundred people even.
There is just no opportunity, to make exit polls when it's about the people who are voting abroad. Because as far as I remember, this is already exit poll number 16 we conducted, and we never had the support from the international donors to conduct any exit polls outside of Ukraine. And normally there is not that much need in it, because the level of control there is much higher, supposedly, because actually the differences in political culture may actually help to get their results more, transparent way.
But actually, that was one of the things about this particular election, whether you thought any of the candidates should have won it is the fact that now Ukraine really stands as a beacon of democracy. The elections have largely been seen by international observers as free, fair. Certainly, you don't have to go too far away in, for example, Russia, where you wouldn't ever see a sort of a stadium debate or anything like this. So does that have an effect on your statistics, do you think, from previous elections? Do you think people are now more open to voting, or have you not really seen a difference?
There is not that much difference in how open are people for voting. We never had any issues with answering to exit polls. And actually, again, it's due to the methodology that people are sure that their votes, are preserved in secrecy. So they have the opportunity to demonstrate their opinion confidentially if they are actually willing to do this. But what is really very interesting so far is what happened with expectation of people across the first 100 of days after the election. Because we know that expectation of people are pretty high.
Yes.
And not always they are actually correlated with what president can do directly due to the responsibilities he actually held on up to the legislative frames. And also what is really interesting also it's what we will have with parliamentary elections because we already have some preliminary data when we can actually say what parties, if would it happen that parliamentary elections would be, for example, taken in some close time, would brought to us in terms of what parties would be selected by people.
Oh, interesting. So for you, the presidential election is really just the start of your work.
Well, it's one of the stages of our work when we're talking about the, these introducing the results of electoral, again, orientations of people and attitudes to the specific candidates. So now we are done with presidential elections exit poll, and next national exit poll will be focused on the parliamentary elections.
Okay, perfect. Well, we'll have to leave it there. Thank you so much for coming into our studios. It was great to have you.
Thank you for having me here.
That was Dr. Svitlana Khutka, the spokesperson of the Kiev International Institute of Sociology. Thank you for watching UATV and stay tuned for more.